I want to start by just extending my appreciation to you, James. I was also very, very I mean, Fred, I was deeply moved, and I was thinking that the last time I was that moved was when I had the opportunity to hear James Gilligan speaking on this topic as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel deeply that doing work with the prison population is something that is it's just key. It's just critical. So I very much want to continue and learn more about the work that you're doing. So I also do not have a slideshow presentation for today. I have an old PowerPoint that I thought about reworking and revamping. But instead, what I did is just create some notes, and I also really do want to speak from my heart here. Um, I sent in my email to you all a bit of my story of how I came to this work, and it was originally through reevaluation counseling and then through focusing. And I had a real deep sense of the importance of these peer-based practices for my own personal healing, for my own personal growth. But in terms of my work in the world, I knew that it had something to do with groups. And as Kathy correctly pointed out, focusing was wonderful on a personal kind of a plane, but and even though I was part of a wonderful changes group that took place in the North Oakland Hills, it still felt to me like there was some other dimension that I was looking for. And so when I stumbled across this workshop in dynamic facilitation is the name of the methodology. My friend Tom Atlee had invited me along with a number of other social change activists that he knew to a workshop that was being held that Jim Ruff was teaching, where the majority of Jim Ruff's clientele at that point were mid-level managers in business and in government. And the majority of the people that my friend Tom had brought to this workshop, a number of them were grassroots activists fresh off from the streets of the anti-WTO protest in Seattle. And the first afternoon of the workshop, the kind of mutual curiosity and acceptance and interest that I was feeling in that room was mind-blowing. I felt like I had really come home and found my work. I felt like this is diversity work. This is conflict resolution and transformation. I don't care what it's called. Originally, my friend Tom had to drag me to this workshop because I was not interested in, or so I thought, in group facilitation. My experiences of group facilitation up to that point were that, people talk about herding cats or trying to get people to color inside the lines. I'm much more of an introvert, although I can put on my extroverted persona for a few hours at a time. But what I saw Jim doing there in front of that room was doing deep listening and reflecting to each person at a time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know how to do this, right? One of the things that is also interesting to me about this work is that I think that when we shift into a creative mode, we have to shift out of our linear, logical control orientation. And so it can't be about, well, for the first 30 minutes we're talking about this, and then for the next 20 minutes we're talking about that. Because if we're dealing with a situation that people feel very passionately about and have very different perspectives on, what each person in the room sees as the key central issue is going to be different, right? So there's lots of meetings where we can spend half an hour trying to define our terms even, right? Because what words mean to each of us is coming from different perspectives. So instead of doing that, this is a process where we welcome all of the perspectives and then retroactively organize all of the data that's coming in to make nice logical sense instead of trying to organize the people and their contributions. So I've been practicing this work since 2000. I started teaching a little bit in 2002. I answered some of these questions here that you had asked, Sean, in terms of who attends the workshops for the most part, organizational development consultants, group facilitators, mediators, and coaches. We also have a sizable proportion of lay community change agents and social change activists. The purpose of the workshops is for both professionals and lay practitioners to deepen their skills in helping groups transform conflicting perspectives into creative collaboration. And there's applications in the business world in terms of team building, management team development, collaborative decision making, participatory organizational change processes. And also, and this is what's closest to my heart, is it has applications in the government and public administration world, primarily in the areas of participatory public policy development and multi-stakeholder facilitation. And I believe I also sent out a link to a 5-minute video to all of you showing a recent civic council in Austria where on the subject of the refugee crisis. And I forget now what all I said in that email, but to me what's really fascinating is that this is not a one-off experiment, but that they've been doing, I think by now, like 35 plus of these experiments in the last 10 years. So this work has inspired me to go back to school, because one of the things that I notice is that there is often a lag between the new discoveries that practitioners are finding out in the field and what is being published in academia, and I really want to help bridge that. There's some wonderfully inspiring work that I came across. The folks that Edwin recently interviewed, who were creating some of the academic theory building to explain the success that NVC has had in the world. I think we need a lot of that with a lot of these approaches. So I'm just delighted to be in this community of researchers and practitioners, and I'm just really, really glad to be here. So I think that that's really it for now. I'm happy to, share more, but happy to have questions and comments and all that as well.
Okay, thank you, Rosa.
Leanne have anything to say before she has to leave?
Thank you so much, Kathy, for inviting my comments. Rosa, I was really moved by the depth of work you're doing in social justice, social activism, particularly in participatory policy setting. So bravo to you for trying to bridge that very critical gap between what practitioners are discovering in the field and what we're publishing in academia. We really need your help with that, and so I'm extremely grateful, and I look forward to connecting with you offline outside of this hangout, and I will connect you with a colleague of mine who I think you can really mutually boost each other's work.
Great, thank you so much, Leanne. I look forward to that.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for sharing, and have a wonderful Sunday afternoon.
Bye, Leanne.
Thank you,
Leanne.
Edwin.
Bye.
Bye, Leanne.
Unfortunately, I'm in the same place that Leanne is. I made an 11 o'clock appointment. When I saw 10 minutes each, I missed the question and answer period. I thought there was going to be one at the end, so I've got people knocking on my door. And Rosa, thank you. I'm in the same place. I keep getting drawn towards public policy discussions, and I'm looking forward to having more talks with all of you about how to bring this into the world. And Edwin, if I can contribute curriculum to it, I'm glad to do it. It's going to look a lot like your nonviolent communication workbook, any restorative justice text, and the nonviolent communication facilitators manual.
Well, thanks for taking part.
Glad to do it. Okay. My pleasure, and great to meet you all.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Good to
Bye,
meet you,
Fred.
Bye, Fred.
Be in touch
Bye-bye.
with you.
Okay.
So I have a bit of time. Is everybody else okay with having about 10 minutes of Q&A? So Rosa, thank you. I've really enjoyed we did a joint dynamic facilitation, or I like the word, I put the brand empathy on everything, so call it empathic inquiry, because it seems like it's a very empathic approach where the facilitator is empathizing with all parties and really modeling that empathic listening approach and way of being, and then it kind of converts the whole group into a mutual empathic relationship and creates a space for working through disagreements and coming up with creative solutions and moving towards action. So I really see the power and potential of the process. I've noticed in your work that you seem to be, is it accurate to say you're moving to see more that empathy is central to the work that you're doing? You seem to be organizing more and more around that. So.
Thanks to you, Edwin. We had some conversations that really inspired me about that, because I realized that, I see empathy as implicit in focusing. I see empathy as implicit in dynamic facilitation. I see empathy as implicit in NVC. And yet, it's actually a little bit more explicit in NVC than in the other two. And I remember this conversation that we had where you were saying, well, it's like if we all use a common hashtag, we'll be able to find each other more easily. And yes, it has deeply inspired me. I love the term empathic inquiry, and we'll be using it more often. The other term that I am using is creative conversations across difference, or CCAD, because I think it really describes what we're talking about. I do want to back up now that we have a little bit more time for comments and just say that I was very inspired by Kathy's thesis at one point that she shared with me, where, if I'm remembering correctly, just the asking people to pause and to not interrupt one another in a meeting context helped the conversation go deeper. And I think that, so I just want to say that I think that focusing has a lot to offer to us, and I recommend that everybody that I train in dynamic facilitation learn the focusing process, because I think it can deepen our ability to listen to others. And at the same time, one of the things I love about empathic inquiry is that we don't have to have everybody learn to focus first in order to participate in a productive conversation, because it is a natural ability in people. So if we create the conditions where people are able to drop down into their reflective spaces, because they know that they're not going to be interrupted, because they know that somebody else is going to listen and reflect back what they're saying, just that sense of safety helps people to drop down more to a felt sensing place. And so, yeah, so.
Absolutely. I think just if we could just get a listening circle as a skill that everyone knows, as a cultural phenomenon. I said when just a few of us were here that I had the idea we could change the world if we just went to CNN and said, stop letting people interrupt each other in these panels you have, and then the Democrats and the Republicans might hear something new. That would be such a huge cultural intervention, because if you aren't interrupting, you might possibly hear what someone else is saying. It would be a huge cultural intervention. I call it passive listening. If two people are having an argument, you can just get them to sit down in chairs and have uninterrupted turns. They may start out screaming, but over time, they're going to drop down, as Rosa says. You can't scream forever if no one's screaming back. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea, Kathy. And I also think that, well, for instance, in the co-counseling realm, we had this idea of, if you really need somebody to listen to you and your partner really needs somebody to listen to you, and you don't have a third person who can offer a listening space for both, then one idea is that you take short time turns. Okay, you go for a minute, I go for a minute, you go for a minute, I go for a minute. Because the thing is that when we are triggered, it really makes it hard to listen for longer. So having, without first having had the opportunity to, I love this term that we were introduced to by Fred before about, you know, restoring our sense of empathy, restoring our listening capacity. So when we're triggered, it can be so helpful if another person is able to help restore our empathic connection with ourselves by being able to, you know, be there and listen and reflect. But when both people are triggered and there's nobody else, that short turn taking can be a wonderful way to restore the listening ability of the system.
And I am also so thrilled that you and Jim, whoever is entering at the level of CEOs and policymakers, go for it. I mean, what a wonderful thing you're bringing to the world. And I'm not going to get to them so easily telling them I'm going to bring compassion to their workplace. So I just think it's wonderful. And the more of that, the better.
I'm also really feeling very inspired by what's happening here with all of us learning about one another's work, because I really feel strongly that there's a synergy that can begin to happen here. So, Kathy, I'm just delighted that, you know, I'm not the only focusing person here, and likewise, in terms of all of these different ways, you know, Edwin, that you've been collaborating before with Shuan, with, you know, that you have your listening partnerships with Leanne. I just think that there's a wonderful network, a wonderful web of mutual inspiration and support that we can create here. So thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Shuan, for getting this going.
I think Shuan had something to say. You're about to say something.
Oh, yeah. I think what you presented was very stimulating, very thought-provoking, and also a lot of rich resources, thoughts. So I just wonder if you have maintained a blog or anything that I can read more about what you have done. I want to learn more. That's what I'm saying. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. So I'm really into all this open source thing. So I do have an irregular blog that I post from time to time. It's called The Listening Arts, but that's not the URL. I will send you the URL afterwards. I also have a book that I've written on dynamic facilitation where I was really inspired by a couple of other examples. Marvin Weisbord and Sandra Janoff, they're organizational development consultants who wrote a book on future search that just really spells out how to do it so that you could even pick up the book and do one just from how detailed it is. And then Harrison Owen, the founder of Open Space Technology, also wrote a book on open space technology where he described it all. So even though there's an experiential component of all of this, my goal in writing the book on dynamic facilitation was to put as much as I could into it so that theoretically somebody could pick up the book and just learn how to do it just from everything that's there. I do think, though, that there is a really important value to being able to experience something. So I'm like, have chart paper and markers, we'll travel. I am very open to offering pro bono demonstrations of this approach, participatory experiences where people can, you know, engage in it, experience it for themselves, and then explore in a conversation what that was like and what their learnings are. So if you ever want to invite me into one of your courses, Shuan, I would be delighted to do a guest workshop.
And how about, Rosa, your website and the name of your book?
Yes,
so a little self-marketing here.
Yeah, thank you. Not my forte. My website is diapraxis.com, and that's DIAPRAXIS, and I can put it here on the chat.
Yes, please.
www.diapraxis.com. And if you go there, there will be links to my book, which is From Conflict to Creative Collaboration, A User's Guide to Dynamic Facilitation. Although the next book is going to be speaking much more about empathic inquiry, thanks to Edwin.
And did your book win a prize?
Oh, thank you. Yes, it did. There's a oh gosh, I'm not even going to.
Independent booksellers, I think.
Independent books or independent the indie
books.
Indie Award. So it's for authors who have self-published, which is much more common these days. Mm-hmm. And so there's a number of awards in different categories, and I won a semi-finalist in the business category, or in something like that. Not on the tip of my tongue, but thank you so much for mentioning it, Kathy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's give a round of applause here to Rosa. And I should have done that for everybody, forgot. So, yeah, this was great. So thanks, Schwan, for having come up with this idea. And we just kind of jumping in on it. This is, I found it's worked really well. It's really been creating connection for me and getting us all together. And thank you, Rosa and Kathy, for diving in and taking part. And we can continue this discussion online and see about next steps. We're going to be doing another one of these next week. So I imagine, in 2 weeks. So if you want to present again, something a little bit different too, we can, you can meet another group of folks, and we can get this empathy curriculum and networking all rolling. So,
and you're going to maybe do a listserv, a discussion list?
Setting that up too. So it's going to be ongoing. This is for the next year. This whole curriculum project, I think, is going to be my focus to get this up and running. So we'll do listservs, we'll have Facebook, and more of these groups. We're also on Saturdays have a kind of more of a work group where we're getting kind of an open space for people to come in who want to learn about the project and see how they can contribute. And then next month there's a design course again that from IDEO, that 7-week course. So I'm looking at setting up some of those courses, and it'll be groups working on the curriculum, seeing how can we design this curriculum. So we'll use the design process and kind of target, make that a design project for the group. So I got a lot of ideas, and I wish we had a bit more time to talk about those now, but we can continue maybe online, and I see a lot of other kind of projects that we can do together. So thanks again, and maybe we'll just have a round of applause for all of us for having done this. So.